Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Futurum Tech Webcast. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, and I'm joined today by my colleague and fellow analyst, Ron Westfall. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning indeed. Yes, bright and sunny here finally in this neck of the woods. So thumbs up.
In the middle of the Midwest, it is neither bright nor sunny. It is yet again raining. So I guess we'll just take it. We'll take it.
Thanks for the offload.
So today in this webcast, we're going to talk a little bit about recent developments in the 5G market, including what we thought were some of the most interesting announcements coming out of Mobile World Congress 2021. So we're going to start off by talking about an alliance between Ericsson and Google Cloud and why it improves Ericsson's 5G proposition and its overall partnership momentum in the 5G space. Ron, tell us what you think about that.
Yes, as you know, Shelley, we did some important research in terms of what operators are looking for with their cloud strategies. And one thing that came out clearly, that is when it comes to certainly BSS to cloud journeys,
Right.
that the operators are most interested in having multi-cloud capabilities. That is, they don't want to be committed to one cloud provider exclusively because of the dreaded fear of lock-in. And what this alliance is portending is that there's definitely going to be more advancement in that area. And so as a result, Ericsson's alliance with Google Cloud demonstrates that not only can Ericsson work with Google Cloud, but also AWS, and likewise, naturally, Microsoft, Azure, et cetera, as the operator prefers. And this is something that Ericsson has been building during the course of this year. And I think what's interesting about the announcement is that it's really crystallizing how cloud alliances can help operators better target verticals. For example, they emphasize the transportation segment and the healthcare segment, et cetera. It's really up to the operator to decide, which verticals they want to emphasize as they become better at providing 5G services to the enterprise side, the B2B side, or the B2X side. And what I think is also important to note here is that both Google Cloud and Ericsson are working with Telecom Italia and its test bed in Rome to really hone 5G core capabilities or 5G C capabilities. And this is important because that's where the programmability is going to happen. That is, allow the operator to be really agile in terms of, one, being able to provide a service with much better time to market capabilities, but also to quite simply adjust the service according to dynamic customer needs. So you're not having to wait months and months just to make, say, a simple bandwidth change. Now, this can be done on a much more dynamic basis, or near real-time basis, and so forth. And so this has been coming for some time, but what's really important here is that it's becoming much closer to market reality.
Right.
And in addition to this announcement, we're talking about, Ericsson's partnership momentum. During Mobile World Congress, Ericsson actually came out with the first multi-operator RAN implementation in the market, and that was specific to Japan. That is, Ericsson is using its MRAN implementation to enable both KDDI and SoftBank to use the same RAN technology to deliver their services. So this is something that's actually a breakthrough. Normally, you don't hear operators sharing technology because they're usually competing neck and neck against each other. But this is showing that times are changing, that the name of the game is really about efficiency. It's about how they can best serve their customers. And if that means having to pool RAN resources to do that, then so much the better. And naturally, that particular initiative is aimed at countering what Rakuten has been doing in the Japan's market, really proving that a native cloud or a cloud native implementation can work in terms of delivering mobile services. It's a telco cloud implementation that's really the first one that's gaining commercial traction in the world. And we're seeing, for example, Dish looking to emulate the same thing here in the US. So this is all good news. It's showing that the market really is going forward in terms of making 5G a reality, but also making the cloud part of it more effective.
I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about something else. No, I'm kidding. I'm thinking about an interview that I did in the last few days with Chad Andrews from the IBM Institute for Business Growth. And it's a separate research arm of IBM. And they're really doing some fascinating things. And they have done some research around, as have we, around the topic of how 5G and edge computing is basically going to completely redefine the booming economy. And also our conversation yesterday was about how that will impact telcos. And, you and I have talked a lot about this. We've done our own research about this. We've written about this. The reality of it is, what IBM has ascertained from their research is that, it's believed that the digital economy will present a period of growth from about 2024 to 2030 that's beyond any economic expansion that we've ever experienced in human history. Okay, that's a big statement. And so much of this has to do with the telco industry and how communication services providers operate, how they used to operate, and how they need to think about operating moving forward. And one of the key things that and again, you and I have discussed, all of us here at Futurum have discussed, is smart strategic partnerships are the way to go. And I think that's some of the theme of what we're seeing coming out of Mobile World Congress is smart strategic partnerships. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that moving forward.
Exactly. And that, I think, is perfect timing because, as we know, 5G, the way it's designed is that it requires hosting.
Right.
And so this is a dramatic departure from previous implementations where the hosting component was not either required or it just wasn't in play. And
Right.
so this coincides with, using the cloud model. And it's really at the edge where the cloud model and the 5G networks can really come together and deliver these innovative services and spur, this digital economy to, unprecedented economic growth. And this is, I believe, validation that we're seeing today that is setting up that prognostication for, validity. And so it's good news. It's very encouraging.
It is. And I think that as we look at who the early adopters in this space are, who the fast movers are, there really is such an economic advantage. I mean, this isn't, again, going back to my conversation with Chad, there really isn't a lot of time to sit around on this. And yet many CSPs are. One of the things that came out of IBM's research is that there really is a very definitive advantage to early adopters. And of the high performers that responded to their survey, 45% of those folks, those companies, expected to outperform financially in a space of 2 years. So this investment in 5G and edge certainly is not without pain, right?
No doubt.
But the financial reward is exponential. And those same folks who were in the early adopter space, 91% of them expected to outperform financially in 5 years. So these telcos, these CSPs are out there, they're making plans, they're being strategic about it, they're making partnerships, and they are really moving this ball forward. And so, if you're operating in this space, it is very important to pay attention to, what the opportunities are and to not snooze.
Exactly. And what is aligning with this is around the Mobile World Congress, AT&T came out with two major announcements just within the last couple of weeks. The first one is the fact that they are aligning with Microsoft Azure to entrust their entire 5G core implementation. So this is really a game changer. This is demonstrating that a major carrier is committing to that cloud model and entrusting what can be characterized as crown jewels to make this happen. And so this is, I think, really to AT&T's credit because before this announcement, they were, looked at as kind of spinning their wheels in terms of they had to come out of the direct TV purge, and that, they lost billions of dollars with that investment. And also they had to unload their telco media assets, and it resulted in a deal with Discovery. And so as a result, they really needed to come out charging with a multi-cloud strategy, because right after that announcement, they announced a partnership with Google Cloud to move their edge computing capabilities closer to customers, to give them more flexibility in terms of on-premise or network-based implementation of 5G services. And so this is, I think, validation of exactly your point, Shelly, that the operators, the CSPs, really need to step up their game, really demonstrate this type of commitment to get that early adopter advantage in terms of actually making it real in terms of their arrangements. So this is, I think, really showing that this is not any longer just pie in the sky speculation. It's really becoming real.
Yeah, and I think that here's one of the reasons you don't want to delay in terms of what is you're doing if you're a CSP. Think back to the days of that little company called Netflix, and how Netflix reached out to the big players in the media and entertainment business and said, "Hey, let us license some of your content." And the media, those players said, "Awesome. This is another revenue stream. It'll be great for us. It'll be fantastic." But what happened, and by the way, it was great. It was great for consumers. It was great for Netflix. But at the end of that road, what happened was that Netflix owned the data. Netflix knows what I watch, what you watch, for how long, and the media and entertainment companies that were licensing their content were completely shut out of that data. So I think for CSPs, as you're thinking about the partnerships that you want to make, the things that you're going to do, the strategy that you're plotting moving forward, think back to that example of Netflix and owning the data, and how important that will be for you and your business moving forward.
And that aligns exactly with why I understand why AT&T partnered with Google Cloud for its Edge initiative, because Google Cloud obviously is part of Google, and Google operates the YouTube network, and that is the Edge implementation par excellence. And they are definitely doing the same kind of thing as Netflix, having a real-time knowledge about viewer patterns, about what is going to sell online in terms of video content. And we are certainly aware that video is going to be a prime driver in terms of how operators and their partners are going to monetize 5G deployments as it just becomes better. 4K, 8K video capabilities, AR, VR implementations. For example, even somebody who's working from home could very well need a VR application for training or reskilling and so forth. So this is just showing the way. Like, all of these alliances are important, and it's pointing to, hey, we've already had success with this. Now we can take it to the next level.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more of developments that came out of Mobile World Congress, since we promised that's where this discussion would go. We touched on Ericsson and Google Cloud, and let's talk a little bit about Qualcomm and Capgemini, and how they smartly used Mobile World Congress to promote their partnership.
Yes, I think what's important here is that private networks are going to be a big part of why 5G is going to be a difference maker. And that alliance emphasized, first of all, Capgemini systems integration capabilities, and being able to leverage Qualcomm's purpose-designed portfolio for 5G private networking. And the reason why private networking is becoming even more attractive, it's been around for a while, and there's a lot of successful LTE private network implementations. But what 5G can do is obviously improve on those capabilities, even lower latency, more bandwidth, and again, that programmability, flexibility that comes with 5G. And I think it's important because enterprises are obviously adopting more private network implementations for
Right.
fundamental security reasons, reasons that have to do with the fact if I have a manufacturing facility, I don't want to risk, having information have to go through a Wi-Fi network. Wi-Fi could be appropriate for other, on-premise applications, but not, for the fundamental task of making sure that a manufacturing facility is running on a real-time basis in a fully secure manner. And that's where 5G private networking comes into play. And there are other use case validations. But I think it's a really good announcement because it's reminding the industry that there's a private network component here that is complementing all the other headlines that we're seeing related to 5G, certainly on the consumer side, better cloud gaming capabilities, as well as on the enterprise side, some of the things we talked about, vertical use case networking,
Right.
for example, as well as AR, VR, et cetera. So it's really about having that flexibility to deliver those services according to the customer's preferences.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the 5G core and why it's ready for, every time I say ready for prime time, I think about Deion Sanders, which means that I am old AF. I mean, really? So what we're going to talk about here is Netcracker, NEC, and AWS and what they're doing around 5G core. Talk to us.
Yeah, you bet. And I think that's another important announcement because it's demonstrating that a lot of the success of the operators is going to depend on migrating or transitioning their 5G core capabilities to cloud implementations. And this trio is demonstrating how this can be done very successfully. First of all, Netcracker is a subsidiary of NEC, and it's actually Netcracker's domain orchestration capabilities that is enabling the instantiation of NEC's 5G core capabilities. And so this already is demonstrating just how flexible this approach is, how this specific solution has the agility to meet all of these different scenarios that we talked about, plus more. Who knows what's going to be an additional breakthrough capability. For example, when LTE was first deployed, nobody knew that Uber was going to be a takeoff business model
Right.
because of 4G capabilities. And of course, your Netflix example is another great demonstration of this. So this is definitely laying the foundation for it, but it's also demonstrating that this type of partnership, this type of strategic partnership is what's going to enable capabilities like network slicing, being able to have that ability to meet the specific network requirements. And also, I think it's important to note that this alliance is demonstrating NEC's capabilities. For example, when it comes to Open RAN implementations, NEC is leading the market right now in terms of being the lead integrator, at least 6 publicly announced deals. And so it's actually fascinating that Japan is kind of being the hotbed for enabling 5G, at least open 5G implementation breakthroughs. And I think it's important to note that's in stark contrast to China, where there's a lot of 5G subscriber numbers, but they are committed to a closed proprietary approach. And they're using, Huawei and ZTE technology for that more traditional approach. And so it's kind of, a contrast, what is going to be the prevalent 5G technology, at least in some parts of the world, the proprietary closed approach will still be applicable, and it has, some benefits. But I think at the end of the day, it's really the open 5G model, the open RAN model, that's going to be critical for really enabling all of this agility, all of the programmability requirements to really make 5G successful on an across-the-board basis, but across a much wider spectrum of capabilities, and versus enabling better bandwidth with proprietary 5G. So I think that's some of the key takeaways from that particular announcement. It's really highlighting the fact that it's the 5G core that's going to be a real test bed, or beyond the test bed, that it's really going to be that application innovation that's going to enable these cloud breakthroughs.
Yeah, and I think that NEC is, added to the list of companies that are really focusing on assisting operators in monetizing 5G services. And I think that, that list gets longer every day. But I think that's an important element of it, and when, when when you talk to CSPs about where they are in their digital transformation process and embracing these things, there's a lot of laggards. And so I think when we have, huge companies that are really focused on, Ericsson is doing the same thing, really focusing on how messaging and solutions that help operators monetize their investments and serve their customers and that sort of thing. I think that's really important.
Yeah, NEC is a prime example of, back to the prime time
Yeah.
theme. I also think of television programming in the
Right.
20th century.
Back in the day when we watched television during prime time, which we don't do anymore.
That's right. Yeah, that model is basically in the dustbin,
Right.
and so yeah, it's all about video streaming, and I think to NEC's point, they're a good example of that multi-cloud approach because obviously, in working with Netcracker, they did it through AWS's cloud capabilities,
Right.
using AWS Outposts and so forth. But also, subsequently, NEC announced a strategic alliance with Microsoft Azure, where now NEC itself is basically selected Microsoft Azure as their preferred cloud partner for their own work from home post-pandemic workforce model. And
Yeah.
so it just goes to show like it's about that multi-cloud flexibility.
It
You're
is.
working with one cloud provider in this area, 5G core, but then you're working with another cloud provider for your fundamental, organizational transformation. And so it's just, interesting times. I think you can look at all of these major players and look at, how all their cloud alliances are increasingly multi-cloud, and
Right.
it's just interesting how it's breaking out.
Yeah, I agree. So I am going to wrap this conversation. And for those of you hanging out with us today, or for those of you listening to this on our webcast channels, on our podcast channels, I will link for all of you in the show notes the report from the IBM Institute for Business Value that is really fascinating. And I will link some research that we have done on telcos and kind of a market insight report. And I will link a couple of more in-depth articles that Ron has written on each of these topics that we covered today in this conversation. But for us here at Futurum, thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you, Ron, always for sharing your gray matter on the topic of 5G and Edge and what's ahead. And we'll see all of you again soon.